Welcome to Mana's Seal YouTube channel. The previous video link is on the description box or on the top right card. Volume 15, The Half-Elf Godkin. After reading through the contents of the thick binder to the end, Ainz returned to the first page and stamped his personal seal with a plop. After a brief moment of hesitation, he also stamped the seal of approval. With this, the matter, printed in this binder, from Ainz's point of view, some sort of ultra-high-level solution for a political issue, was approved, and Albedo could begin the process of selecting the appropriate personnel to dispatch. Ainz handed the binder to Lumiere, who was waiting by his side. This concluded the last of his work for the day. Ainz glanced over at the clock. The clock's hands read 10:30. Ainz's work started at 10 o'clock. In other words, his workday didn't last even half an hour, but this was the status quo as of late. Although Ainz's work generally gets completed before noon, this was still far too quick. Starting work this late was something that the salaryman Suzuki Satori had never experienced, swing shifts aside, but that was nothing more than Satori's personal experience. It wasn't rare for those employed by the megacorporations to start work late, and according to Overlord, the fact that such a shift system existed was a kind of privilege in itself. Well, considering the work lives of this world's inhabitants, for example, villagers like Henry and Etheria, starting work at sunrise and going to bed at sunset, is the routine. It was mostly the same for the city dwellers, although their mornings started, and their nights ended a bit later compared to the villagers. The availability of magical illumination, or the lack thereof, is the most important factor governing this. Nobles who had easy access to magical illumination were able to start their work late in the morning, since they were able to work as late into the night as was necessary. So, did all of Nazarick start work at 10 o'clock? Not at all. Nazarick was a black company among black companies. First, the regular maids were divided into morning and night shifts, and their working hours were long. It was the same for Cocytus's vassals guarding the 9th floor. Break times were vaguely defined at best, and hardly anyone took short rests. There was no time set aside for things like snacks or smoke breaks. Even so, about 90% of those with such schedules were not discontented with their workload. As someone who wanted to create a pleasant work environment for his subordinates, Ainz had asked the maids about this situation. His impression, upon listening to their answers, was there must be something wrong with their heads. No, perhaps it would be better to say that their loyalty was sky-high. Ainz shuddered a bit when they said with serious faces that it's completely normal to work without rest when you have items to nullify fatigue. Furthermore, the only demand made by the remaining 10% that were dissatisfied with their schedules was that they wanted even more work. However, that's in the past. Perhaps it was him just being selfish, but Ainz had always wanted to provide his employees with generous benefits. To this end, Ainz started by focusing his attention on the regular maids. This was because, first of all, they were extremely low-leveled. The fact that they were all attractive women was also significant. While Ainz didn't want to play favors, he always ends up being soft on the maids compared to Cocytus's vassals. If he accomplished his wish through an order, nearly everyone in Nazarick would obey it without question, but doing so might damage their morale. So he needed to make a good argument, which he did with the following explanation. In the future, the regular maids might need to train and manage human maids. When that time comes, they would need to take care not to overwork the human maids with the work routine they had been following up till now. While they protested initially, Ainz ultimately succeeded in reducing their working hours and increasing their leisure time. Previously, they got 1 day off every 41 days, but it had now been doubled. They get 2 now. Ainz still felt like nothing had really changed, but there would likely be stronger resistance if he tried to push further. Or rather, that was how Ainz read the mood, so he had to stand down at that point. Consequently, Ainz failed to incorporate the day-off system, paid leaves, summer vacations, public holidays, etc. Although he framed it as being for the benefit of the maids, perhaps the real reason he pushed for some kind of paid leave system, despite the NPC's opposition, was because of Suzuki Satori's yearning for a concept he never got to experience for himself. And so Ainz ended up stumbling upon another idea. As the ruler of Nazarick, Ainz reduced his own workload. He wanted everyone to think that it was alright to take it easy because Ainz himself wasn't doing too much work. Of course, another part of the reason was the possibility that Nazarick would end up in shambles if he did any more than minimum work. But this idea ended in failure. The denizens of Nazarick ended up thinking that they had to work even harder to make up for him, as it was natural for Ainz to not have to work. As a result, Ainz's already meager workload, which mainly consisted of just approving things, was reduced even further. This was probably for the best. There would be disastrous consequences for Nazarick if the less than competent Ainz took over a larger share of the workload, but the fact that the others had to work more as a result was something that he did feel bad about. Ainz took a glance from the corner of his eye at the pair of maids who were staring at him unblinking, with stern expressions and fire in their eyes. One was waiting on Ainz for the day, and the other was assigned to his room. Both of them would immediately ask, "Is there anything I can do to assist you?" if he met their eyes. To avoid such an encounter, he could only take peeks like this. They don't have to take things so seriously. I wish they'd relax a bit. This tense atmosphere is making my stomach cramp up. Ainz tried to remember the last time he saw the maid smile. Mentally sighing, one last time, he called on the maid standing by his side. "Well then, Lumiere." "Yes, Ainz Sama." "Just to confirm, was it the last of my work for the day?" "Yes, Ainz Sama." That was the last of it. The reason he asked the maid attending him was because secretarial tasks were being handled by the regular maids during Albedo's absence. It seemed as though there were no audiences or negotiations in today's schedule. Even so, work has a tendency to crop up unexpectedly, so he couldn't let his guard down. His caution was warranted, as the unplanned work that might emerge in the wake of a message from Intoma tended to be the troublesome type that ends up making his non-existent stomach churn. Is that so? Ainz looked at the other desk in his room. Even though the desk had been set up at Albedo's insistence, she was not there now. Most of the time Albedo worked side by side with Ainz in this room, but it had only been a few days since the fall of the royal capital, so she was quite busy at the moment. She could be seen running around Nazarick and sometimes traveling afar to deal with the issue in person, so her presence here was rare. Upon questioning the maids about Albedo's status when he wasn't around, Ainz found out that she had been on edge recently. Maybe it was because she was overworked, or maybe it was because she wasn't able to meet with him as often as she'd like. If it's the latter, maybe it would be best if I increase the time she spends with me. There was no reason to deny her wish, if that was enough to get her back in high spirits. Because no one would speak if Ainz did not, the room fell into complete silence. Truth be told, Ainz wanted the kind of workplace that was filled with idle chatter, but his experience over these past few years told him that there was no way the maids would participate in such a thing. So lonely. It seems like this is going to continue for the rest of my life. Well, there's nothing to be done about it. However, maybe there's a need for a change of environment. Normally Ainz would spend his free time on many different activities. Equestrianship. Reading books on business under the guise of reading scholarly works. Also books on governance. The reason none of that material managed to stick in his mind was probably because he only ever skimmed through them. It's certainly not because his skull was empty. He would also conduct various magical experiments. Recently, he had also started training under Pandora's actor, in addition to his arms training under Cocytus. Now then. He spoke as though he was talking to himself, while letting his words reach the entire room. This was done on purpose. It was time to start taking action. The plan he would soon commence was to help Aura and Mare make some friends. The first step was to make preparations toward this end. As for what kind of friends they should make, dark elves would be his number one choice. Following that should be members of closely related races like elves. Though he was expecting a future where all races lived in peaceful coexistence, introducing them out of the blue to lizardmen or goblins as their first friends was not a good idea. First, they should proceed with similar races. He looked at Lumiere. "We will move to the 6th floor. Attend me." Understood. Although she would follow along even if he had stayed silent, Ainz felt that it was probably better to say it out loud. With Lumiere in tow, Ainz teleported to the 6th floor using the power of his Ring of Ainzulgown. If he had ordered Lumiere to bring the people he wanted to meet to his room, she would have done so. As the supreme ruler of Nazarick, it probably would be more suitable to call over the people in question. However, he did not do so because he wanted matters to proceed amicably. For that reason, it would be better if Ainz went in person to express his sincerity. They would probably feel a sense of intimacy and respect if he went to them, instead of rudely demanding their attendance. If the fact that the ruler of this land specially appearing before them could put the right amount of pressure on them, it would be even better. The people he wanted to meet were the 3 elves that were captured when those workers intruded into Nazarick. We should have questioned those elves in detail when we moved them to the 6th floor. Well, we couldn't back then. A few years had passed since then, and while some basic information had been gathered about their circumstances, they had not been asked questions about the elven country or any personal information. That was because Ainz wanted to maintain his position as the friendly undead who had saved the elves from their slave master's tyranny. If he had drilled them for specifics about the location of their homes or about the elven race, they might have suspected that he had ulterior motives, and so he wouldn't have been able to preserve his image. But wouldn't it be the same if they were to be asked those questions now? Not really. The situation now was different from when they were just the great, underground tomb of Nazarick. It wouldn't be suspicious at all if Nazarick, the sorcerer kingdom of Ainz, which had brought many races under his reign, wished to gain information on the elven country to open diplomatic relations. Now I have a suitable excuse for everything I wanted to ask them. Plus I don't think the twins are the kind to have bullied them. It would be great if they completely opened their hearts to me, but I should temper my expectations. I would have given better orders back then, if only I could have thought this far ahead. Even as he thought about this, Ainz disliked the idea of Or and Mare having to treat those elves with faint kindness on his orders. Though if it was Demiurge or Albedo, he wouldn't have given a second thought. As with the earlier comparison between the regular maids and Cocytus's vassals, it was not good to let one's judgment be influenced by appearances. However, Ainz could not rid himself of his bias, probably because he was just an ordinary person. With Lumiere following, Ainz walked down the dimly lit corridor. A large portcullis loomed ahead with sunlight spilling in through the lattice gratings. Further ahead was the circular arena on the 6th floor. It was possible to directly teleport to the twins' residence using his ring, but he chose not to because, as if it was an automatic door, the portcullis quickly rose up. Ainz suddenly had a sense of déjà vu. He had visited them in the same way on his first day in this world, when he also met the small figure standing before him now. "Welcome Ainz-sama, we have been waiting for you." The energetic voice of a young girl welcomed him. I have some business to attend to, or I will be relying on you." He was fortunate that Aura was the one on guard duty today.